I'll read just a few sections from the book for not longer than 20 minutes. Part of the book, and this is a novel and stories, so you can either read the stories separately or you can read it straight through as a novel. But it's based on the community of Rapidan, Virginia, which is in Virginia's horse country, a rural farming community, and it's where my father grew up and where my grandparents raised horses. And the first story in the book was actually inspired by a little diary. I'll pass it around. My students have already seen it. This is a transcript of a diary that was kept by my great-grandfather's first wife, and she died in 1861. And one of my aunts found the original and transcribed it and typed it up and had photocopies made and bound and gave it to all the grandchildren and cousins and everything. And what it is, it's a record of her trip when she was 18 to the Peaks of Otter, which was a tourist site back in the 1850s. And then later on in the 1850s when she was married to the man who would become my great-grandfather, Cary Holladay. And they had 2 children, neither of whom survived. So much of that little diary is a record of intense grief, a mother who lost her babies. And it's heartbreaking to read. But I've had that little transcript ever since childhood, and I've read it any number of times. And there's nothing quite like it, just the sorrow in it. And it says in there that it's meant only to be read by her, or in the event of her death, by her husband and, at that time, their daughter. So in some ways, it's a trespass even to have this little diary. And yet, when I read it, and as I wrote this story, I felt almost like I was talking to Mary Jane, and that was her name, Mary Jane Boggs Holladay, and her family had come over from, they were Scot-Irish people, and they'd come over, her parents had come over to to Virginia and settled in Spotsylvania County as part of that great migration. So that voice from the 1850s somehow survived, because even though she died, lo and behold, the second wife didn't throw the diary away, which is somewhat amazing, because Fanny, who came along, who my great-grandfather married when he got back from the war, she could have just pitched it. But she didn't, and to me that too was part of the story. So I'll read a little bit of that first story, which is called The Bridge, and then I'll read a little bit of a later story. Not too long ago. Less is more. When the Civil War broke out, Rapidan has a strategic location because of a railroad bridge there. And the man that, the character that was inspired by this great-grandfather of mine, I named him Henry Fenton. He was in charge of getting people lined up, citizens, to guard that railroad bridge. So I used that in the story, but in the story I had that he was a little too indecisive to decide who, and his wife, Mary Jane, decided. Does anybody know what a walking stick is, a type of insect? Some of y'all have seen, like a praying mantis, that's it. So it picks up with a discussion of the bridge guards. Throwing back like an ugly fish, says Henry, his eyes twinkling when the guards ask what they should do if they apprehend a Yankee. He expects before the war ends that they may all have to fight, at least the old men and the one-eyed boy. That girl, Bonnie Hazlitt, could nurse her baby and do battle at the same time. Don't put it past her. Don't ever say goodbye on a bridge. You'll never see the other person again, Henry's grandmother used to say. From the top floor of his mill, the railroad bridge and the river bridge both look as far away as the Grand Canyon must be. He knows exactly how far it is to points in all directions. North to Culpeper, 13 miles, northeast to Manassas Battlefield, 52, southwest to the Peaks of Otter, 135. Henry could spend all day with maps. Rapidan, he knows, was called Raw's Ford when it was hewn out of forest and floodplain 100 years ago. The Walk land, farmers and tradesmen still populate the area. Long time a mill has been here flourishing, though Henry's is bigger and better than its predecessors. When the railroad came, the was renamed Rapidan Station. All his life, Henry has heard the train. Its song is his anthem. He's 33, landowner, horse breeder, yet on this warm evening in his tall mill, the largest in the region with 6 sets of grindstones, he feels helpless, powerless. The daughter he had with Mary Jane lived 2 years, during which she and Mary Jane were usually sick. His wife will die too, then he'll go to war. She'll die, and I'll fight. The realization sliced through him while he bargains with 2 farmers. He speaks and smiles, but he is wood. Can't they see it? He and the farmers have reached some agreement. They shake hands there with the view of the river and the mountains and the trees. Oh, the old mill's got mice in the walls, mice clever and swift on tiny feet, mice running for their lives up and down the steep winding stairs, riding the lift. In Henry's dreams, they work the machinery. Mice know Henry could not for the life of him say what he and the farmers have agreed on. The farmers are telling jokes, pleased with the deal. When he says, I don't remember a word I just said to you, the men's laughter is a roar. That Henry Fenton, they'll say. Most of his horses are gone to war. The army took him, even his favorite, Bessie Bedlam, the best steeplechaser in 5 counties. A painting of Bessie Bedlam hangs on the wall of the room he shares with his wife. Go get him, Bessie, he says when he looks at the picture. The painter made Bessie's coat too brown. She is bay. He's alone in his high office with a chunk of petrified wood on his desk as a paperweight. The farmers are gone and it's evening, time for supper. The train sounds lonely and loud, and when it passes, he can hear his own heartbeat. His wife is sick. Their daughter is dead. His workers are silent, if they're here at all. Did he send them home already? The mice are silent. Down on the river bridge, the 2 old Pratts, bow-legged as wishbones, face away from each other, one picking his nose, the other scratching his stomach. Never say goodbye, Henry's grandmother said on a bridge. His wife is a Scot. Building cairns is in her blood. The sun moves towards setting. The war surprised him, threw him, thrown as if from a horse. He can't get up from his chair. The mice must be striking all kinds of crazy positions in the walls, on the stairs, in the piles of grain mocking him. It would have taken him forever to choose the bridge guards. The war would have ended before he decided. So Mary Jane, cairn builder, did it. She'll be having her supper on a tray in her room, watching the sundown birds. Bessie Bedlam threw Henry once, deep in the woods, worst fall he ever took. Lying on the leaves, the hard, damp ground, he thought of his chunk of petrified wood on his desk, timbered a rock, its thick plugged veins that once held sap, its sawed-off level base. Bessie Bedlam was not contrite or faithful. Stepping high, she took off through the trees, empty stirrups jingling like a woman's ear bobs. He had to admire